Hi there, and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about jargon. So, jargon is basically any kind of special words or expressions that are used by a particular profession or a group, but are difficult for others to understand. So, put into different words, it's well known terminology within a group of people that is not common knowledge. So, here are some examples. Give me insulin stat. Where might you hear this? Where have you heard this? Typically, stat is used in a medical context, right? So the medical industry is definitely something that has a great deal of jargon interwoven into it. Flambe pork in a sided skillet. Well, now we're in culinary. And Charlie is AWOL again. Well, now we're talking a little bit more military, maybe an army kind of tone. And so there's all these different industries, and they all have their own types and sets of jargon. And jargon tends to get a bad rap. But really, at the end of the day, jargon is very appropriate in the right context. And so as we look at jargon, when to use it, when not to use it, the biggest thing to consider is your audience. Is this appropriate for the audience, given the context? So when it comes to jargon, I think there are two types typically that most people see. The first one is technical, which we saw before, and the next one is flashy, which gets a little bit more into your marketing side of things. It's your flashy buzzwords and your catchy slogans. It's the things that people use to try and make themselves sound a little bit smarter. So I think when I'm boiling down which one is which, technical has the intention of informing, right? They are just simply trying to communicate details a little bit faster than normal to professionals, between experts, right? Flashy, I think the intent is to impress a little bit more than it is to inform. And you'll notice this a lot too. Flashy jargon tends to be a little bit more vague. You're not quite sure what's being said. It sounds nice, but what are they even saying? And so here's an example. The doctor says the patient has acute atypical tachycardia. Who would you think the doctor is talking to if they were to say something like this? I would think a fellow professional, another medical professional, someone who understands what these words mean, right? Because if they were talking to the patient or someone who came with the patient, it would be just as easy for them to break that down and say the patient's heartbeat is suddenly and abnormally fast. If we were to break down each of these words, acute means suddenly. It just happened very quickly. Atypical being is not typical, it is abnormal. This is not normal. And tachycardia refers to the heartbeat beating abnormally fast. So it's a quick heartbeat. So that's an example of when it would be a good time to explain, given that your audience does not know anything about this terminology and could benefit from a little bit more context. So let's look at something else. Marketing says a 360-degree review provides actionable insights that disrupt the status quo and enable you to pivot into a holistic approach that leverages big data. What the hell does any of that mean? If we were to break this down, a 360-degree view all the way around. And so when I think about what type of a product might be able to provide that, well, I think of a dashboard. And so I might simplify that and just say our dashboard, right? What is our dashboard doing? It provides actionable insights. Actionable insights, what is that? Why do we want that? Why does that matter? Well, actionable insights are insights that you can easily take action on. So this is something that facilitates that action. It makes it easy. So our dashboard makes it easy to disrupt the status quo and enable you to pivot. If we are disrupting the status quo is the norm. It's the way things are, it's the way things have been, and it's rocking the boat. So we're disrupting the status quo and we're enabling you to pivot. So what are you doing when you're pivoting? You're changing direction. And so what is this really all saying? It's facilitating the implementation of change. Next part, holistic approach. Holistic being something that includes the whole and considers the whole approach. So I would see this as something where maybe you want to implement some changes across your company, across your customer base, whatever the context is, you could just say across the company. You could just spell it out. That leverages big data. Big data, what is that? It's these massive sheets of data that are being distilled and compiled into typically KPIs, key performance indicators, right? And so if we were to just say with key metrics, does that not still communicate the same thing? We could take this big, long convoluted sentence and break it down into, our dashboard makes it easy to implement change across the company with key metrics. Doesn't that sound simpler? Isn't that a little bit more clear? It's less gunked up with all the extras and the fluff, right? It's a little bit easier to understand. So what does jargon do to the wrong audience? Many of us have found ourselves in this place before. As we can see, the man on the left is looking quite confused. He's looking pretty baffled to be hearing what he's hearing, right? The one in the middle, pretty checked out. This guy is clearly in la la land, daydreaming and not hearing a word of what's being said. And the last one, as we can see, he's a little bit frustrated, right? So when we use jargon in an inappropriate context, it leaves our readers feeling confused, lost, and estranged. The last guy is completely disengaged. He doesn't even want to be there. So we have people who are hearing what we're saying but not able to understand it, people who are not hearing what we're saying because they've completely checked out, or people who are hearing what we're saying and they really don't want to be. And so when it comes to improving our jargon, there's two ways to handle it. The first is to explain it. And so that's what we saw with the example with the doctor, right? Atypical acute tachycardia. The heart suddenly started beating fast. To simplify it is a little bit more of what we did with the marketing, right? So sometimes simplifying involves just using simpler words. Sometimes it involves actually removing sections. So kind of weigh those two out as far as what you think would be best in that given situation. But when it comes to fixing jargon, that would be the two approaches that I would recommend. I'd say most industries have their own set of jargon. This is just an example of a few. And I would say, whatever industry you're writing for, consider the audience. When you're trying to decide whether to include jargon or remove it, explain it or simplify it, just ask yourself, does it clarify or does it confuse? Is it helping my audience to better understand, or is it just adding distractions and confusion that are not really helpful or productive? Thanks for joining us today, and I will see you again soon. I've been Jeffers.